What is it called?
Virunga National Park in the Congo. They have gorillas in this park, and traditionally, they've been funded by tourism because only 1% of the government spending went to conservation and the park. And they started Bitcoin mining in about 2018-19, and because COVID came in, they would have been wiped out because there's no money coming in. But instead, this mining operation has built out public infrastructure of energy. It's built out roads, pumping stations for water. It's also enabled, economic development in that area because now you have power. You can set up a textile mill and employ people that would normally go be in the militia or something that is dangerous and, not good for society. Yeah. And so, they're providing this local economic development that, again, isn't government coming in or the UN coming in or IMF or the World Bank. This is an alternative. And I'm sure you've interviewed Alex Gladstein.
Yeah.
And he talks about, the IMF and the World Bank and the progressive policies that have
financial repression of the poor.
Exactly. And so this is this other option. It's so optimistic. Yeah. And that's why I'm excited because, I've worked in the government and it hasn't worked. Yes. And it's happening. And it's happening in places like Africa that really need it.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by In Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the world's first startup accelerator program focused exclusively on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what is possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com today to apply for the program or learn more. Again, that is wolfnyc.com.
Mags Gronowska, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I hope I said your last name right.
You did.
Took me a lot of practice.
It's Polish, but it's okay.
We are sitting here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I've been here for the Bitcoin Ski Summit. And for our audio listeners at home, we're having a real life fireside chat. So if you hear any snap, crackle, pop, that's what that is. Just by way of quick introduction, you are an advisor with PRTI, which is an energy technology company. Can you tell us a little bit? I guess we'll get into that later, actually.
Sure.
Let's start with you, who you are, your professional background, your path into Bitcoin, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I spent a decade in government and before Bitcoin, and then I found Bitcoin. And sometimes this path does intersect. But so I spent a decade on low carbon economic transition. So it's really, how do we shift the economy? How do we move our grid into a place where it emits less carbon? And that's throughout all sectors of the economy. But I did work most with heavy industry, so steel, cement, the most energy intense industries in an economy. And it was really about how do we reduce their emissions, but also how do we keep them in Canada? Because I work for the Canadian government. As we shift our economies, it becomes a lot more expensive, right? There's a carbon price, electricity prices go up, So we need to figure out how to keep them there so that our economy is strong.
Right. Interesting. And so you said you worked in government. What was that like? What were you doing? We have pretty low opinion of government on the show, as I'm sure you know. So I just wanted to hear like what it's actually like in some cities.
I think it's frustrating because it used to be a profession that was quite, thought well regarded.
Yes.
And as, politicians do all sorts of shenanigans, reputations go down. I will say that policy advisors typically tend to work pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times too, because I worked around, environmental types of issues. And typically it does attract those folks that want to do well because they feel passionate about it. We're there for a reason. And so I don't have too many bad experiences from the policy folks. What I do think is disappointing is a lot of times as you move higher into government, you kind of, the veil lifts. And a lot of the times it really is about how do we get reelected again?
Right.
And it's not necessarily for the reason, of this makes the most policy sense. It's like this will buy us more votes down the road, especially if, they think they might lose the election. And this happens in the US, in Canada, and everywhere really, because it's those short-term goals, right? Those 4-term cycles and issues like climate change or energy, transition. It's long-term issue. It takes decades of planning.
Right.
Think about how long, creating a nuclear plant is, right? And so there's always been that disconnect.
Yeah.
And because of that, we have these externalities like pollution, whether that's waste or climate.
Right. So it's, high time preference, as we would say in Bitcoin, but it's these broken incentives that seem to be distorting effective governance, perhaps?
Yeah, it's probably, you're right, because the politicians' incentives are, I want to be back in power.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. What can be, total speculative question, but
Yeah.
Bitcoin standard, how would we fix that to make that look better? Just longer terms? Because then you get into the risk of tyranny, right? So there's gonna be some happy median.
Yeah. Maybe it's just, I think it's changing, like the 2-party models tend to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I think more collaboration too between government. I think one problem that I've seen is one party is in power, all this work is done, let's say it's good work, right? And then another party comes, and because the other party implemented it, they got everything, right? So all this government money was spent, ideas were formed, consultations were had, and then it's just scrapped, and it's very frustrating. But it's not just frustrating for those folks that work on policies. It's frustrating for businesses because they had certainty. For example, when I helped put in cap and trade in Ontario, and, that took a decade to form. And then we were planning the next decade in terms of GHGs, how they would be, how the targets would be met. And businesses weren't more like, we don't want it. It's like, tell us what you want us to do and get out of our way, right? When Ford scrapped it, because new conservative government came in, I think it was quite frustrating because there's a certain business certainty that comes from, we know what's expected, and they hire the right people, they buy carbon credits, suddenly it's gone. So all that work and certainty is gone. So why would I come to a jurisdiction that just flip-flops around regulations and policy when I can go to a place that's going to be, pretty consistent because it's expensive for me
to comply and figure it out. Yeah. So I love that perspective. I've heard it put that the stability of rules is the bedrock of peace. So I give smart people clear guidelines and they just figure it out, right? It almost doesn't matter what those guidelines are necessarily. Just
give them.
Change them so much.
Yeah.
Okay. And then your path into Bitcoin, what was that like? What was your orange pill moment?
Yeah.
Did you have a shitcoin?
Oh, I had a shitcoin phase. Okay, it started with number go up. And I think that's not that special, but it is for a number of people.
Everyone,
it is.
So.
And so, you buy that and then you're like, what's this other thing? Like Ethereum, you buy that, you buy ICOs, everyone gets caught up in this falsehood.
Shitcoin jungle.
And then you lose a lot of money and you kind of find your way to Bitcoin because you start to dive into the fundamentals, right? And there's a lot of things that resonate because I did the low carbon economic transition, energy systems. Mining has strong foundations in where I come from my decade in government. So I think that resonated with me. But I also have these family stories that reinforce my belief in Bitcoin that I think, it's just so important to tell too, so that others kind of understand, and maybe they have their own personal story that will resonate with them. So for example, when I was young, we left Poland because of communism. We were trying to escape communism to Germany.
How old were you?
I was just 5. And so my family packed everything that they could into this little car, and mostly it was stuff for me because I was I was a baby, but I was young, right? And the government messed up. They actually gave everybody a passport. Usually they give like 2 passports, not the whole family. And so my family's like, oh my God, we won. Like, we can leave.
Right.
But even at the border, the lady's looking at it and she's like, looking at everything packed up. She's like, you're not coming back, are you? And they didn't want to lie. She's like, just go. But they were scared because, they have guns and they're like, are they going to start shooting? But everything we took was just in that car.
Wow.
But even worse is my grandma. She had this beautiful home she would tell me about, like luscious gardens in Poland. But when the war broke out and after the war, the borders shifted. And so what used to be Tarnopol in Poland now became Tarnopol in Ukraine. And she lost all her land. She lost her house. Like, that was just taken away from her. And, it's painful because she loved living there.
Yeah.
And just thinking about, just the whims of governments, shifting borders, like everything that you own is just gone.
Yeah.
And then a second kind of similar situation to like sort of family wealth and heirlooms. And what you leave behind is, so my grandfather, his grandfather was an artist, and he had so many beautiful paintings. And again, war broke out. They were scared. They had to leave, so they locked the house. But when they came back, when it was safe to, it had been broken into and all the paintings were gone and he had nothing left. And then he was just telling me he was walking by and an art gallery had some of his grandfather's paintings. Somebody had hawked them, but he couldn't even afford to buy them back. And I remember looking at, seeing, oh, maybe I can buy one for him, but they're expensive. And it's just like, there's no way, they were just stolen. And it's, again, a similar type of situation. So I think it's you want to leave something behind for your family as a legacy, and these stories of assets that can be taken. Bitcoin is a little different.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. I feel the emotion in that story, and yeah, it's easy to just kind of sit here and say, oh, it's money that is hard to steal, right? It sounds very kind of cold and but this is very real for people's lives, like people that have had assets seized. Yep. Or had to flee the country, or like without any of their money or savings or capital. Like, that's a very disruptive life event.
Yeah.
So
and you have to start over, and it's so hard to start over.
Yeah. And so I probably don't do a good enough job of this, but to come back to like the real human, this is not just abstract philosophizing we're talking about here. Like, this is impacting real people's lives. So it's interesting you were very predisposed to understanding Bitcoin, having had that in your life. Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's very beautiful. Tell me about, I guess we're fast forwarding a bit in your career now. There was a Canadian exchange collapse.
Yes. It was the worst case of what could happen on an exchange until SBF, which I think honestly copied what Gerald Cotton, the CEO of Quadriga, did, just on a much bigger scale.
Wow.
So it still happened. And yeah, so that was a $200 million exchange. And
this is a Quadriga.
Quadriga, yes.
And
so
what was your role in that?
I was appointed by the Supreme Court of Canada to be a bankruptcy inspector. So I oversee the bankruptcy. I'm one of 5 inspectors, and we oversee the trustee EY and the legal team that's responsible for it and all the creditors. And so, again, worst case scenario. So he embezzled money. He bought lavish vacations.
This is the CEO, right?
The CEO, I think he bought about 10 properties. Cars, planes, boat, everything. He took users' funds and he traded them on another exchange. He created fake accounts and then, traded with other users, funding them with fake money.
Wow.
And incurring losses. He was a terrible trader. So there was $140 million lost. What saved us, though, was there was funny business of commingling between his personal funds and user funds. And so CIBC held back $30 million and went into court, and that saved us because that meant we had some money. And those hard assets, those homes and other things that he bought, we could then resell. So we had about 40 million that we recovered, but everything else is gone. And so it's a testament of like you yourself, self-custody is so important.
Yes.
And then we see it again because it continues to happen. Even like, the next 4-year cycle, you have an even bigger exchange that did the exact same things Gerald did, bought $100 million worth of properties this time, lost billions of dollars. And, so it's again, that story of only put what you can afford to put on an exchange and then self-custody yourself.
Trust everybody, but always hold your own keys.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So it is incredible that was what year? Quadriga was what year?
2018 at the end of it when he died and then went to India. Went to India, died, and then, but he had
died in air quotes, right?
Well,
kind of
knowing that most of the money is lost because he traded it, he had big losses, makes me a little more certain that he did pass away. Apparently a body came. The thing is, when you're on the creditor committee, sure, you can make that decision. Do we want to dig up the body and find out? But it's a matter of like, what's the best use of user funds? If it's not going to help us recover more funds, just knowing that he's alive or not doesn't tell us where he is or the money is.
Gotcha.
So it's better spent on things like tracing or other things because all the money that's left, that's it. And so it belongs to the victims.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an unsolved mystery.
Maybe maybe sometime something will happen. You never know, right?
It's just amazing that's 2018.
Yes.
Late 2022.
Yeah.
You get the same thing.
Same thing, but
memories
10x.
so short.
Yes.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, iCoin Technology. iCoin has just released a sleek new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone, a little touch screen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, no GPS. It's a strictly physically cold hardware wallet. Like I said, it's got a high-res 3-inch touchscreen. It's got a camera for air gapping the wallet. It's got optional Bluetooth compatibility. And it's really a brand new UI, UX experience for a hardware wallet, making it very accessible, easy to use, not intimidating. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like iCoin Wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. Go to iCointechnology.com today and use promo code Bitcoin23 for 30% off of this new sleek hardware wallet. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. There's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. Like, I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi lets you use Bitcoin privately while still maintaining full control over your money. Specifically, Wasabi Wallet is an open source, non-custodial wallet with privacy built in by default. By using Wasabi, you're effectively putting the private back in private property. Wasabi Wallet is an easy-to-use privacy wallet that can support any amount of Bitcoin transactions. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download this state-of-the-art wallet software.
What can we do? Like, what are we not doing, I guess, to get this to click for people? Or do they just have to learn through these painful events? I always say on the show, pain is information. Myself, I've had to learn everything the hard way, most everything the hard way. But it does seem there's a big advantage to be gained if we could not learn that way.
Yeah, I do think trial by fire is a powerful motivator for learning. It happened to me because I lost money in Quadriga, but and especially like having it happen earlier rather than later before the stakes are really high. Secondly, I do think like we can still get better at user experience. making it easier to do things like self-custody. And we're starting to get there, right? Like, I think 4 years ago, it was a little more challenging. We're starting to integrate hardware wallets with mobile, which is, I think, somewhere where we need to go. Just make it easy, make it tappable or something like that, right? So I think we'll get there. But it's funny because like every, 4-year cycle, sure, the money is bigger, but there's more new users. So there's more learning. So you're going to get it. And then hopefully, bad actors happen, whether it's in TradFi or in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So just, help your friends out.
I guess, I mean, that's
education.
That's a reason a lot of this regulatory stuff exists. I mean, at least ostensibly, and I'm sure it does serve a purpose. But in crypto, you just don't have it, right? It's total wild, wild west, and it's like, I
don't know if it's wild, wild west still. I hate saying that it's still the wild, wild west because, like, for example, Canada does have pretty clear regulations now, especially like they keep putting out guides. It's not perfect. And I know the US is more challenging because it's regulation by enforcement, which isn't the best approach. But I think the expectations are known. Yeah. And also, like, the industry has come a long way in terms of these are the best practices, right? Because we've seen all these things happen. We know proof of reserves are great, and some places do proof of reserves. So there's a little bit of extra trust, right? And I think we're starting to get even better in calling out bad actors and knowing like just don't do business with them. But then, like, of course, we get taken by surprise.
I know,
yeah,
because FTX was supposed to be the most trusted crypto. I mean, after a collapse like that, it really reinforces the thesis that it's all Bitcoin and no shitcoin, right? It's everything else is a waste of time. It's all a scam. Hold your own keys, like.
Because other than Mt. Gox, which was Bitcoin only, we haven't really had a Bitcoin only that I can think of that something was quite like bad actory, right? And but here's the thing: bankruptcies take years to work through the system. Like Mt. Gox, people still have not received their money, and that was 2014. Fingers crossed that Quadriga, we beat them to the punch in terms of distributing to users. But they're complex, and they're only getting more and more complex as more types of assets are there, as these exchanges start to do weird things like DeFi and lending, and there's different classes of customers. So it just gets crazy.
I'm sure the forensic accounting on all of that must be an absolute nightmare.
Wow. For sure.
Wow. So you think the law, your point that it's no longer the wild, wild west, do you think the law is effective enough to prevent the next FTX? Because the reason, when I said wild, wild west, I agree there is some regulatory clarity, sort of, depending on what we're talking about exactly. But the shenanigans continue, right? Yeah. The Sam didn't matter. He was compliant, right? Yeah. It was an FTX, a compliant exchange, but still biggest Ponzi ever. So like, how do we get past that aspect of the wild, wild west?
For sure. So I think there's two things there. One is you have to put in regulations that make sense, so that you can still, for example, continue to operate in that country because it's financially you're able to, versus if you just leave, you're like, well, this is too burdensome. It doesn't even make sense for us to open shop. We're exiting this country completely. And then customers go to an offshore exchange, right? So you don't want to make them so that, for example, Canadian government was kind of looking at custody and saying, well, you have to keep everything in a qualified custodian, including your hot wallet. Like, this is something they were contemplating at one point. I remember this. It really doesn't make sense to, like, a hot wallet is those funds that are being traded and sent in and out. So if you want them at a custodian, that means that the exchange then has to have their own funds that are available to clients. And that's a big risk for them. So that's something like, weird like that would make it, not logical to operate. Other things like the U.S. infrastructure bill, right, around nodes, and miners, like putting stricter rules around it. It didn't make sense, and it was almost like it's an infrastructure bill, but it's going to destroy the digital infrastructure. So you have to, I think the big issue is they haven't talked enough with industry to understand what's feasible, what isn't. And again, they're trying to, square peg, round hole. Like, we have these traditional regulations, so we're just going to try to fit it in. I think sometimes you really do have to scratch the board. I love what El Salvador is doing, right? They put in the Bitcoin law. It was quite simple. And they're like, well, we're repealing everything that doesn't make sense. And now they're starting to build on top of that. They're starting to put in securities regulations, but new ones.
Yes.
And so that's the kind of work that I think needs to be done. Something that makes sense for the industry, not an industry, not
Right.
laws that were written 130,
New laws for new technological
Exactly.
paradigms.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
Or at least meet us in the middle.
Yeah, right. And when I was in El Salvador with Max and Stacy,
Yeah.
Stacy described that securities framework in El Salvador as like an anti-shitcoin securities framework.
But I think
Good.
that
It's
is,
gonna pay dividends, I would say.
it's kind of moving in that direction too in the US and also in Canada, right?
Yeah.
There's Bitcoin and then there's other securities and you get like little differences in every country, but it kind of seems to be where it's going.
That's good. Let's talk about PRTI. What is PRTI? You told me something that has something to do with waste tires and
Yes.
energy production and maybe some Bitcoin mining.
Totally. All those great things. I like to think of it as a digital refinery, maybe. So what PRTI does is it takes tires. And so there's 350 million tires thrown out in the US every year. That's a tire per person. 1 billion tires globally. And that's just every year, not to count all the tires that are in landfills. It's a huge problem.
Wow.
And you used to take tires and chop them up and put them in soccer fields or like kids' playgrounds. A lot of places are making it illegal now, like in Europe and some states in the US, because there's volatile compounds that are toxic that are released that actually have harmful effects on humans. So there's one solution that used to exist that isn't there anymore. Some landfills are starting to ban landfilling of tires because it has toxic, it leaches into the ground, toxic chemicals. So again, like here's a real problem. We continue to manufacture tires. Tires are really hard to dispose of because, they're made in a way so they can take a pounding on the road, right? So it's hard to do something with it because of how they're structured.
Yeah.
And so we come in with this technology where we have a vertical reactor. We put the tires in. We kind of like bake it. It's called thermal deconstruction. So you're deconstructing it with higher temperatures, about 250 degrees. And in about 11 hours, you get several different products that are all useful.
Yeah.
So one is an oil that can be burned in diesel generators for power. One is a synthetic gas like natural gas.
Okay.
There's a black carbon type of product that currently we sell it to another company. It has BTU content like coal.
Okay.
And then the third is steel, because 25% of a tire is steel to give it that rigidity.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So that steel can be sold for scrap. And so we have 4 products that we can sell, but at any point, all the energy products, we can use them to make energy and mine Bitcoin. So we can mine landfills and get, the best part is actually we get paid to take the tires in, right? We don't pay for power. Like we get paid to take
raw materials.
Exactly.
Wow.
And we can sell all the products. So that gives us optionality.
Yeah.
So if we're on an island nation, for example, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, where it's expensive to dispose of things because there's limited land, right? What do you do with it? Or B, power is expensive because you don't have the natural resources that perhaps Canada's. We have tons of oil, or Saudi, the Saudis. And so you're looking, you have 2 kind of problems that you can tackle with our technology. The downside is we do need to build those reactors. So there's an infrastructure cost, but the operating costs, because usually, energy is expensive.
Effectively subsidized, right?
Exactly. Well, yes, I guess so. Because you still have to look at the depreciation of your...
Right. I was just thinking the tires, if they're paying you to take them in, and that's the raw material of the process, it's kind of like a natural subsidy.
It is, but it's more than a subsidy because you're getting paid, right?
Right. Yeah.
A subsidy implies that it drops the price.
I'm like subsidizing your operating costs.
Yes, that's a great way of thinking of it. Yeah. And I think what's really exciting there is it's like, here's an environmental problem, right? That has a solution. And it's, again, a market-based solution. It's not like the government saying it's illegal now to do something with tires. So you have to think of something else. It's like, no, sure, we'll gladly take them because we can make money, using it. And so, Bitcoin mining, you can mine Bitcoin off of it, and we do. And that's awesome. But you can also just, stick it in, for example, Africa or another country like this island nation and provide energy security to that place. And I think that's really exciting too, is having that optionality. And if it's a bear market, just sell the energy.
Just sell the energy.
Right?
Wow. That's a very interesting business model.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Bitcoin Conference 2023. This 3-day event will be held May 18th through 20th in Miami Beach. This is going to be the biggest event of the year, as it always is. And the past 2 years in Miami have simply been amazing. Day 1's Industry Day. Days 2 and 3 are going to be open to general admission. And I'd say this is a great place to go and network with Bitcoiners or even look for a job. Just a really all-around great experience. There's a fantastic speaker lineup, including Michael Saylor, Zoltan Pozar, Lynn Alden, Alex Gladstein, many others. And last year, we did a 10 million sats giveaway for this event, and we're going to do it again this year. So to get discounted tickets and enter for a chance to win 10 million sats, go to b.tc/conference and use code BREEDLOVE. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's C-A-S-A, today to sign up and use discount code BREEDLOVE.
And that's being well received, I imagine. I mean,
I think so. We kind of have been laying low because the reason why is that the group of folks involved, we want to make sure that everything's been tested. Like, it's been running since 2016. Like, it has, 10,000 start stops and like 100,000 over, so many hours of operating. And it's just like, we want to make sure everything's perfect and right. And it's been working for so long. Like, we're set. Like, it works, right? And we're setting up another site in West Virginia. And then after that, another 10 sites. And we could have up to 800 sites all around the world.
wow.
Yeah. And so the funny part, well, not funny, but so everybody tends to focus, on Bitcoin mining and the carbon impact. And there are places coming in where you can reduce GHGs, like from landfill gases or farming, but everyone focuses on carbon. But but Bitcoin and, the network and everybody involved, the participants like miners, we have solutions for other major global issues, right? And just think about it too. It's not just like the energy side, like there's humanitarian things that come into play too. And this is why I'm so excited about mining, is because, so think about Africa for a minute, right? Like, we're so lucky because we have lights, right? We can charge our phones, we have power, we have water when we turn on a tap. But in so many places there, like, they don't. They have to carry water. Everything shuts down when it gets dark. And we have miners coming into Africa, and they're subsidizing public infrastructure. They're building small, run-of-the-river hydro, local, like a small local energy grid, pumping stations for water, right? You can charge your phones, roads. And that's the reason why, is because a Bitcoin miner has come in a place where traditionally, you need a commercial or an institutional or industrial player that can support the build out of that infrastructure. And by having a customer that's going to be buying 24/7, 365, you then can go, for example, get money in the bank, and they're like, yes, of course, we know this can be profitable. And the exciting thing is this isn't just relevant to Africa, right? It's relevant to Texas, where the same thing is happening. Miners are co-locating with renewable energy producers. And because of that, the project is more likely to get built, get over that hurdle rate. And this can happen in places like Canada, where we still ship diesel in to disconnected, like grid disconnected places. Right. So like this works, doesn't matter where, like all around the world. And it's not the government, it's not the taxpayer that's funding this. It's not the ratepayer, which are the users of the electricity system. No. It's like this other third pocket, which is like Bitcoin mining, and the Coinbase reward that is given is incentivizing, this system. So that's why I love mining. It's like this elegant system of economics that provide these incentives that aren't like, the negative incentive, like the stick of government saying this has to happen, or taking from the public sector public dollars and figuring out what's the best way to allocate. Well, the best way to allocate is a market-based incentive.
That's right.
So I think that's why it's exciting, because like I said, I worked for government for a decade on low carbon economic transition, and we're still not getting where we thought we would be a decade ago because government is reluctant to put in, like the targets to ratchet them up to where we need to go. And there's not enough money. We need trillions of dollars of infrastructure spending, whether it's the private sector or the public sector, that hasn't been spent. So those goalposts move, right? Carbon goalposts. Now we're talking like 2060 carbon neutral or whatnot. And so take that all away, and it's like, here's another option. And we're getting those, taking care of those negative externalities, whether that's waste, right? Whether that is carbon.
Yeah.
And it's starting, and I'm glad these stories are starting to be told. And I will tell you my favorite story.
Okay, please.
So this is Virunga National Park.
What is it called?
Virunga National Park in the Congo. They have gorillas in this park, and traditionally, they've been funded by tourism because only 1% of the government spending went to conservation and the park. And they started Bitcoin mining in about 2018-19, and because COVID came in, they would have been wiped out because there's no money coming in. But instead, this mining operation has built out public infrastructure of energy. It's built out roads, pumping stations for water. It's also enabled, economic development in that area because now you have power. You can set up a textile mill and employ people that would normally go be in the militia or something that is dangerous and, not good for society.
Yeah.
And so, they're providing this like local economic development that, again, isn't government coming in or like the UN coming in or IMF or the World Bank. Like, this is an alternative. And I'm sure you've interviewed Alex Gladstein.
Yeah.
And he talks about, the IMF and the World Bank and the progressive policies that have
Financial repression of the poor.
Exactly. And so this is this other option. It's so optimistic.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm excited because, I've worked in the government and it hasn't worked.
Yes.
And like, it's happening. And it's happening in places like Africa that really need it. Yeah, sure. An ETF would be great in the US. But like, what makes us happy is seeing like these positives, crop up because of these economic incentives.
That's
so yeah.
amazing. Yeah. So it's almost like Bitcoin's picking up the slack where government has fallen down.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. This is where it's amazing to me when like stories like that really make me think we are extremely early because if there was a general awareness about that story you just shared, I mean, people would be head over heels for Bitcoin like we all are, right? It fixes so many things.
Yeah.
So toward that end, that beautiful story, like how can we accelerate the replication of that in other places?
Yeah. So one, I think what you said, telling stories is helpful. So we can take these stories back, whether it's El Salvador, right? Whether it's Africa, and because our governments have the same issues, right? Like Texas, and how do we fund renewables? How do we fund low carbon transition with, North America? Like, here's a real story. And they're happening at kind of a micro scale too in the US and in Canada, right? And there's really cool stories. And it's a matter of talking to them. But it is frustrating because there tends to be a partisanship, right? Both in Canada and the US, it tends to be those in the more conservative sides of government that kind of understand that more. But that education is so critical. And I feel like it's been lacking, especially in Canada. But also, telling those stories just to the global world. And I think we're all, at least in our circles, we're not relying on mainstream media as much these days, right? People are listening to podcasts like yours,
social media,
Rogan.
Yeah.
Things go viral a lot quicker. And so finding those channels to go viral, maybe I'm not a TikToker, but there's other ways, right?
No,
and I'm using Nostr a lot more too. And that's something that you cannot block. That story you can't block. Someone can't like twist the words or make it fit their, local narrative. So I think that's an important piece too. And honestly, like time, it's not even like anything. It's like with more time, because I know there are really cool projects being built, right? Like Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin is infiltrating every part of our society, like agriculture, right? There are farms in Mexico and in Europe that are taking waste, like animal waste, again, poop, right? Powered by poop miners. And they're taking the methane and converting it to energy. And they're actually reducing GHGs because methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So when you burn it, you convert it. Landfills, right?
Yeah.
Big problem. And there's leaking methane, potent greenhouse gas. We're starting to have companies set up farms that collect and burn off that. Same thing with, methane flaring in the oil and gas sector. So these are different sectors that miners are coming in. And I already talked about the waste management. And so we're funding that infrastructure, right? The infrastructure that captures and reduces carbon. And I think that's pretty special. And the more we infiltrate, right, the more these stories will get told, because now you have farmers that are on our side. And farmers have always been historically a powerful stakeholder when talking to government, right? Government listens. So now we have farmers on our side. We have oil and gas on our side because, we're helping their industry.
Also with a lot of influence on government.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's like really cool projects. Like there's a district heating project, Mint Green in Canada, that's helping the city reduce GHGs because we're 98% 98% renewable on our electricity grid. So they're fuel switching for the natural gas that traditionally heats the city's buildings. And so these stories, the more there'll be more and more and more in more cities, and that will get told more and more, whether it's the mayors talking to, provinces or states, and then to the federal government. So again, time, like all we need is time, because these stories are starting to leak out to mainstream media, like Virunga National Park story with saving the gorillas through Bitcoin mining. So cool. And so over time, you know what? It's this force. It's like Satoshi's quote, right? Like if you don't understand it, if you don't get it, If
you don't get it by now, I don't have time to explain it to you.
Exactly. Because you know what? You'll get it eventually.
Yeah. Get it at the price you deserve, as so many people say. I agree with all of that. I really do. It's a little bit unfortunate though, right? At least when I don't consume much mainstream media at all, but when I do see these clips on Twitter and whatnot, we're very far from that narrative, right? It's the opposite, actually. It's Bitcoin's boiling the oceans and blah, blah, blah. And you just feel this kind of sense of despair for the world when I see stuff like that, because as you're saying, like I want to say it saves the world, but man, it solves so many problems. Ryan Gentry the other day presented here, and he just had that list. I wish I had it in front of me, like all the problems Bitcoin solves. Yeah. And it's, I guess I feel a little down that more people don't understand that yet. Yeah. But every problem's an opportunity, right? So that's why we're on the show talking about this stuff.
And I think too, like the people that are in this space are so positive and optimistic about the future, and that's reflected in their passion.
And brilliant beyond imagination. Like there's so much brain power in Bitcoin.
Exactly. And it's hard to fight a fight against people that are passionate.
Good-hearted.
I think they're going to win.
Smart,
and good-hearted.
Passionate people, honestly.
Yeah.
This has been like this cultural experience. I'm talking about the Bitcoin Ski Summit here that we've been attending the past few days. I'm an introvert, but man, I actually get energized by by this culture, as the ideas are just flowing from everyone all the time. Like you can't not have a stimulating conversation. And I'm like, how could any other humans in the world outcompete these humans? They're just... You're at the cutting edge of everything.
We've got this momentum.
Bitcoiners are at the cutting edge of everything.
Which is why it's so hard. It's like, I need to learn monetary theory, how an energy system works, how the Fed works. And that's why they're like, I'm going back to my Kardashians or whatever, like brain train. Yeah.
Well, I'm very optimistic about Bitcoin and Bitcoiners' future, and even more so after this. Anything else? Any parting thoughts you want to leave us with? Or anything you're especially excited about in Bitcoin at the moment?
I mean, I think it really is just, it's the intersection of so many pieces that we're building this momentum, and we're steamrolling. And it's like that Japanese game where you like start to pick up small objects, then you pick up, a house. It's like this little ball that collects things, that snowball, and that snowball is picking up industry by industry, sector by sector, and I think it's like, what's next, right? It's only going to get bigger. It's going to pick up something bigger. So I think
you just articulated a great video meme, some little Bitcoin just picking up. So I'm excited because it intersects these many things. There are potential. Again, you're right. Maybe it doesn't fix everything, but it does provide, a plan B, like an alternative solution that I think, can further humankind. Yes. And empowering the entrepreneurial enterprise, right? Just to be able to use a money that actually works and it's not going to get seized.
Yeah.
You know, it's just empowering that human autonomy to go out and solve problems, independent of government or whoever else might try to stop you.
Yeah.
So really powerful stuff. Mags, thank you for doing this.
It was a pleasure.
Really enjoyed our fireside chat.
Likewise.
Where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I'm on Twitter at crypto_Mags. Whenever LinkedIn, Magdalena Gronowska or Mags Gronowska. At the next Bitcoin event.
All right, Miami?
Maybe. I know it's so big. I'm leaning towards Prague.
Prague. Okay, I'll be
Yeah.
at Prague.
Okay,
I'll be
cool.
at both, yeah. Awesome. Thank you again for doing this.
Thank you.
All right.